What's your reaction to what happened?
Well, I think that this was a very unfortunate miscommunication. I think that it is greatly in the interest of both the United States and Ukraine to sign that deal on critical minerals, especially rare earth minerals. And I think that uh, misperception, miscommunication created a blowup, which again is against the interest of the two countries. President Trump said he thinks the deal is important. He'd like to get it done. He's waiting for Zelensky essentially to come back and express some concern about the way that meeting went.
Well, Zelensky
Hopefully,
apparently asked for a one-on-one with Trump after that terrible blow-up. He was instead kicked out of the White House. And he just said in an interview a short time ago that he's willing to negotiate, but he needs security guarantees because he doesn't trust Putin. And the reason it blew up was because he was pointing out all the different ways Putin has violated agreements in both the recent and distant history.
certainly Zelensky is right that Putin would like to take control over Ukraine. Putin does not want to stay in the place he currently occupies. Uh, but Zelensky made a mistake, I think, when he didn't, in response to a reporter's question saying he's not willing to compromise, he didn't point out that in fact he has been willing to compromise. You know, Trump suggested, or his team suggested, even before the inauguration, that for there to be a quick and stable peace, Ukraine has to make concessions relating to territory and relating to NATO membership. And Russia needs to make concessions relating to deployment of European peace enforcers to Ukraine and U.S. and European arms going to Ukraine. Zelensky said weeks ago he was willing to compromise on territory. He should have reminded President Trump of that.
Yeah, well, a few moments ago, Zelensky also said that while he is grateful for American support, he was asked twice, do you think you owe President Trump an apology? And he did not say he thought he did. Regardless of whether or not he believes he owes President Trump an apology, and regardless of whether in fact he owes President Trump an apology, I don't know, the whole thing was awful. And the bottom line is he's sitting there next to the President of the United States, with whom and from whom he needs help. And they're talking over each other and yelling and interrupting each other. It's bad manners. Wouldn't it be better right now for President Zelensky just to apologize and make things right?
I can understand why the president of any nation does not want to apologize publicly. There's a face involved, but I think the circumstances are as you describe it. I think that President Zelensky needs to reach out to President Trump. And, that's very, very important. This reminds me a lot of what happened in September. That's when those incidents occurred that JD Vance referred to, that Zelensky visited the army plant producing munitions for Ukraine. And it happened to be half of the Democrats in Pennsylvania showed up. And it looked like a campaign event, although it wasn't, certainly from Zelensky's point of view. He's kind of ambushed by the Democrats there.
Yeah, but Vice President Vance made sure to get that in, knowing it would really, really infuriate President Trump, which calls into question why Vice President Vance would do something like that.
Well, I think your political editor made the point that Vance has long opposed American aid to Ukraine. He doesn't seem to understand that Russia, in fact, declares us to be its principal adversary, and therefore stopping Russia and Ukraine is very much in American interest. And it's worth recalling that President Trump is the man who enabled Speaker Johnson last April to to put for a vote the aid package to Ukraine that was delayed. And on that day, President Trump said Ukraine's survival is important to the United States, and Senator Vance was fulminating against the aid package. So it's worth noting that. So I think President Trump's view on the importance of Ukraine surviving is rather different from his vice president's.
All right, very quickly, Ambassador, what happens next in your opinion? I don't think anybody really knows, but if you had to bet, and you know this area well, what's going to happen now?
You're absolutely right. No one knows. But President Trump, even after all of that unfortunate events, said that he would like to get this deal done on critical minerals. And I think it would be smart for the Ukrainians to move quickly to get that done and not raise further in this context the very important issue of security guarantees.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.